uh, I went with a group of people much older than me, but my father was insisting to go, even if I was 14 years old. So uh, it was unique for me for the first time to see and visit all these kind of places. Suddenly, in the second, third day of the trip, uh, we are on a skit close to the desert, somewhere here, in a very, very famous house of uh, the abbot there was Daniel, so they call it Daniele. In other words, the Danielites, if you like. We knocked the door, and an old man came out with a big beer in front of me, and he says to me, "What is your name, young guy?" I said, in Greek, Ioannis, John. He smiled and he says, "Very good. If you decide to stay here, we'll not change your name." So I couldn't believe what he was saying, and I didn't reply to him at all. So he says, "Let me ask you something. Do you know what Ioannis mean in Hebrew?" I said, "No." He says, Ioannis in Hebrew means full of grace. So I'm insisting, if you'll stay, we'll not change your name. That was my first experience. It was not his reply, but it was more the surprise, a different encounter that, of course, I couldn't anticipate before I saw it. Episode number 2. That's not for with me, but with a very good friend of mine and yours, Jean-Claude Larchet, a famous theologian, patrologist from France. He goes to the monastery, and they told him that he has to meet somebody by the name Father Isichios. Isichios in Greek means the silence one, from Isichia. So Mr. Isichios, Father Isichios was there. So Larcet, being a smart French theologian, asked him a question. Tell me something about the prayer of the heart, Father Isichios. Father Isichios replied to him, in the men, there is three things. First is the heart, which is like the will. The heart is like the will. Then the heart, which is the will, has a movement. That's the second part. And the third part is that there's a will, there is a movement, and there is a direction. So take the will, put it in movement into the right direction. And he continued by that simple example by saying the whole point of monastic life, for him at least, is to take my will to be on the right movement and on the right direction, which is only one, and that is Christ. If my will goes into any kind of other movement, in any kind of direction, this is not Christ. And that is what I'm referring to from Jean-Claude Larchet, one of his encounters in Mount Athos. I continue with the anecdote or the story, number 3. Now I am in a new skit. New skit is a very, very big skit somewhere here. Has a lot of houses and very well known and famous. There lived at that time, I'm 16 years old, by the way, and lived somebody by the name Per Evstathios in the new skit. Now, the group of people that I was going with were all uh, university students. I was much younger. I was in a high school, but I follow them because they have been a whole group. And this whole group, the leader of that group, knew Father Eustathios. So on the way up to this skit, from the sea going up to the different houses, we met on the road Father Eustathios, the whole group, and me and my brother also together. And what did we see? Father Eustathios in front of us. He was an older man with big, big glasses, probably very advanced, etc. But what I noticed is that his foot were double than the normal. Some sort of infection, some sort of disease, who knows what. But the feet, instead of being what was supposed to be, was double the size. And he was having very hard time to walk. Very hard time to walk. So we stopped a little bit, we saw him. The others and the leader of the group recognized him because he knew him from before. One of these guys says to him, "Are you in pain?" He turns and says, "What pain?" Just like that. A second guy from the group says, "Can we call a doctor? Did you see a doctor?" He smiled, Eustathius, and says, "I just came for the church. I saw the doctor." So we couldn't say anything. To say what? And then he smiles again and he turns around and he says, "All of you come to my house now." We're about 30 people. All of us come to the house. All right, we follow. Slowly he moved ahead of us, and not very far from there was his house. He opened the house. A bed, a room and a half, something like that. Most of the people stay outside. Some of the people went inside. So we sat there to do what in that small house? Few things here inside, nothing much. But then one of the people wanted to continue the discussion that we had before about his feet and his pain, etc. And he asked him again, "Are you not in pain?" And he answers, "Here is the beauty of the suffering. That was given by my Creator. It is a benediction for my life. It is a benediction for eternity." A different language and different concept and different understanding, everything unique. We stood looking at him. Now suddenly he disappears from us. He leaves and goes in the back somewhere. Nobody were wondering what is happening. And he stayed there for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. Us were waiting inside. And what did he do? He went and he cooked rice on the back. And he brought in all kinds of containers and small things, etc., for everybody to eat. Rice, just boiled rice, nothing else. And he was giving it to each one with a smile. We look at him, what to say no? Cannot say no. We ate, we exchanged, he started smiling again, and eventually we left. But the guy who was in charge of the group, he knew him. He says, "You know what happened? That kind of rice that he had, that was his stuff for the entire year. He saw you and he gave it all away." That was his food for the entire year. So, how do you put all this? Into what kind of logic, into what kind of understanding? But no matter what, uh, this group of people were all students at the university. They have been impressed by that. And first of all, me. He marked my life. I remember his face many times till today. It's like it comes to me, his smile. 3 years after, I was trying to see him again. He was gone. I never saw him again. But if that is not an angelic hospitality, what is all about? You see, an unknown father of Athos. Nobody knew him. Nobody wrote about something about him. He was not recorded in any place, except he is recorded in the proper books somewhere else. And of course, that kind of experience is, you cannot put it into logic, into order, into reason, and thank God is like that. But just to show you, this is the atmosphere of Mount Athos. This is what it's all about. This is what you are open to see if you have eyes. Now, I'm continuing with the next episode, anecdote. I'm now 17 or 18. And at that time, with another group of people, we visited one of the very big monasteries, which is Dionysiou Monastery. Is this big one here? Very big monastery, well established with a very well-known abbot. But everybody was talking about, if you come to this monastery, you have to see the library. Don't miss the library. The library is something unforgettable. And not only on top of that, but on this library there is a very famous monk that is, the érudit, which we'll say in French, really somebody else. And that's Father Theoklitos. So if you go there and you visit the library, you have to see the library first of all, to see whatever, but discuss with Theoklitos. That was a must. I said, okay, good. So we went. We visit the library. The library is one of the best in Mount Athos. He has a distinction between what's manuscripts and what is modern books. And these thousands of volumes, you name them, from ancient Greek philosophy to the modern stuff. An enormous resource, there's no doubt about it. And suddenly we meet there Father Theoklitos. Father Theoklitos, an older monk at that time, in charge of the library. So we are very eager to see what kind of discussions we can have with a person like that. We are all kind of people. We stay there inside the library. And then Father Theoklitos asks, okay, now tell me, what do you want to discuss? No, nobody took the initiative to say one subject or another. Somebody, you want to be whatever, says, can you explain us a little bit of the scriptures, Father? Father Theoklitos says, good idea. Which part of the scriptures you want? They say a couple of opinions, but one of the people says, let's do the Gospel of St. John. The Gospel of St. John. Now, Father Theoklitos, his eyes become white. Oh, the Gospel of St. John. Let me bring you some books first. He went here and there, he picked up stuff, piles here. He says, all right, let's start. The Gospel of St. John starts with, in the beginning was the Word. For this sentence, we have to spend 5 to 6 hours. And if it's not enough today, we'll continue tomorrow. And then we'll discuss the rest. So we stood up and said, what he's talking about? And he says, all right, this is one sentence, one verse for the Gospel of St. John. Let me give you an introduction. And the next hour, he was giving the introduction. Some people, said, where that will go. He continued the second hour. Some people starting, this, the other, flipping here and there. Some stay. But to me, was the biggest lesson of my life. That's how you read the gospel. That's how you read the scriptures. If you want to read the scriptures, read what the fathers are talking about. And to cover them at least, I need. So 3 hours went, and when he saw that half of the people are half asleep, he says, all right, we'll continue tomorrow, but on the same verse. And of course, that taught me a huge lesson of how we're supposed to read the Bible, how we're supposed to. We think that we know, and we don't know anything. If you don't start by admitting that you don't know anything, you'll never learn something out of this. On the last Bible study that we did at home, we are explaining the Gospels and, St. John in the same kind of story. In other words, we need resources, we need time, we need emphasis to understand a little bit why the scriptures for us are scriptures. It's not that stories that you heard the story and you think that you know the story. What is behind the story? Right? As we said on the last time of the Bible study, when Christ says to the people, people are coming, he gave them 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and then we see on the back here, the big fresco, the multiplication of the fish and the, and they ate. But before they did that, he told them to sit down. You cannot understand Christ if you don't sit down, which means if you are not obedient. He needs the obedience first, so he can understand what he is saying. So, but with Father Theoklitos, at that time, that was my probably first unique experience of reading the Bible in the Orthodox way. And of course, remains still today. Even if some of us today or some others, some preachers or whatever, they are being so, they insist to explain the Bible, they have to do it in that fashion. Otherwise, our words are without kind of depth, without any kind of proper understanding. Now, Father Theoklitos, just to give you a small parenthesis, was one of the most aristocratic families in Athens. And after he finished 2 degrees in the universities, at that time, in the beginning of the century, he decided to go and become a monk. And now is the librarian of this huge monastery. He wrote a fantastic book which is called Between Earth and Heaven. And is translated into many languages. Father Theoklitos died about 10 years ago. But I think that tradition that he taught us is still remained the tradition of the church of how to read the Bible. Now we're going to the next story, the story number 5. We are at the monastery of St. Paul. St. Paul is, as I told you before, the monastery before the desert. Here. If you enter the monastery, there is also a library, and in the library there is a big laminated sort of, who says the following: if you die before you die, then you don't die when you die. It's the beginning, just before you enter. So you enter. And then we found in this library of St. Paul, Father Mitrofan. Father Mitrofan is an unknown, an anonymous, if you like, an unrecognized monk at the monastery of St. Paul. I did not meet him exactly. we cannot get to know people like that. The secret treasures of Mount Athos usually leave this world an unfathomable mystery. We simply get to know about them. We don't know them. We know a little bit about them. Now, what do we know about this Father Mitrofan? We knew very little about his past life. And of course, we could discover even less about his present inner life. He was married and had come to the monastery of St. Paul in 1964, when he was approached around 50 years old, just after he had lost his wife. After 25 years, he still wore the same shoes he had when he came, when he first became a monk. The same habit, the same cassock. Shoes meant it 1,001 times. A habit covered in square patches of all kinds of sorts, of dark hues, due were variedly faded, and a monastic hat, puffed by used. Thrown over his huge but light body, all was clean, unfolded this kindly and serenely peaceful figure. This veteran but spotless and cheerless patches that he wore was the best covering for the seamless garment of his monastic integrity. The fact that his cost of living was almost zero. How completely he had renounced the world and the total estrangement to the world from earthly consolations and anything ephemeral and corruptible. During his 30 years in Mount Athos, he has spent in the monastery, he might have uttered no more than 30 words of worldly conversation. A few years ago, they found him in his cell, sitting on a chair, his head resting on cushions, and with a prayer robe warm in his hands. His last breath breathed left us with a sublime remembrance of a cenobitic hesychast. He slipped into eternity with unique ease and passed through the door completely unobserved. Nobody knows about Father Microphone. Nobody reported anything. They report his death, his dormition, his passage to the other life. This is one of the thousands of unknown saints that the Church, because he does not know their names, their actions, their past, etc., he calls them the Sunday of all saints, by including everybody that he cannot name. He cannot put a name into that. He cannot put a story. It's one of them. But it's totally different if you had the opportunity to see some of these people. For 30 years, he did not utter more than 30 words. Story number 6. St. George is one of monk of a rare virtue. He never uttered a word, this Father George. He never uttered really a word. Perhaps they have devoured his body and were parading up or down an art on the remains of the bones. It was full of admiration of his steadfastness, of his fortitude and his endurance. It is around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Father George wants to go to a feast in another monastery. At about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the jeep stood waiting for us at the monastery gate, ready to take us to the harbor, and then from the harbor to go to the new monastery with a boat. Father George, at that time is around 80 years old, has already descended on foot. We, the younger ones, we down in the car. We come into the car to go to the boat. On the boat, I caught sight of him. He was walking. He didn't want to take the car. He was walking. He arrived at the port. He went inside the boat. I caught him in a corner, his head bowed down, literally hanging off his prayer robe. He did not speak to us. He clearly did not wish to destroy his treasured gratitude. When we arrived at the harbor, at the Lavra, a van was waiting there to take us up to the monastery. A walk around 40 minutes, I will say, uphill on the way. Father George had disappeared. He must gone off to pray somewhere, I thought. But when we have gone halfway with the car, we saw him walking up. The driver stopped to pick him up. Father George gestures to him to drive on. I could not understand what was going on. Afterwards, I heard the story. In 1963 was the millennium, right? He had reacted, this Father George, very strongly to the opening of the first road on Mount Athos, from Daphne to Carriès, which has been built in order to make easier for the officials for the millennium celebrations to get about. True to his original position, Father George, he never got into a car on Mount Athos. Even when we arrived at the monastery, and only did, he refused to rest before the all-night vigil service. He did not even want to leave his bag into the room. He says, we haven't come here to rest, or to sleep, or to show honor. We have come to labor, to spend the night in prayer, and to be humbled. Only in this way can we move the saint to hear our entreaties, he said. So he went straight, after all his walking, into the church. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. The vigil started at 9 o'clock on the eve of the feast, and he finished the next day at 12:30. Father George did not leave the church at all. He stayed awake, struggling and praying and standing for more than 17 hours. The boat, at the end, was to leave back at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to come back to the monastery. I lay down myself for 3 hours in a quiet room. I relaxed bodily, but my mind and my consciousness did not rest for a minute. The constant thought was, Father George did not let me. The car that belonged to the Lavra arrived to take us down to the harbor. About 50 meters away, we could see Father George alone and praying with a prayer robe, which he continued to do on the boat. We reached finally the harbor of St. Paul at about 6 o'clock in the evening. My heroic neighbor walked past me. His eyes were all red. His soul was pure white, and his life full of spiritual fruits. He passed the jeep that was waiting from us and carried on walking on the hill to the monastery. The mount of his constancy, the mount of his sanctification. I felt ashamed of my littleness of heart. I wanted to imitate him, but I was unable to. He was 80 years old. I was less than 40. He was twice older of me, but much more advanced in terms of spiritual vigor and richness and divine grace. God granted him from his earthly labors and took him in 1998. He fulfilled his heavenly desires forever. The story of St. George, Father George. Story number 7. I am in a cell in the depths of the Athonite desert, and I have a wonderful experience of a dormition of an ascetic who was not only to God, but unknown to me and to most of the world. I remember years ago when I was visiting two friends of mine who were monks at the Hermitage of Kapsokalivia, how an elder who lived nearby informed us that he had a very important announcement to make. The news was that he sensed that he was about to leave this world. As they say in the monasteries, he asked us to work out prayer robes all together in order to ease the departure of his soul. Such were his yearning and thirst to leave this world that they were beyond us, but we heeded his resolve and began to pray. Lord Jesus Christ, grant the rest to the soul of your servant, the monk X. He started to make the sign of the cross and he repeated, Christ is risen. He makes the sign of the cross again, once again, and then says again, Christ is risen. We continue our prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, grant rest to the soul of your servant. As time went by, his voice gradually became more peaceful and all the time more weak. What he was gaining in heavenly expression, he was losing in terms of earthly time. After a few minutes, he gathered together all his strength and in a voice full of praise said, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Tilted his head and breathed out a half breath. That half of the whole breath that God has given him as he was giving to all of us. The half that is necessary for the body to stay alive. And he kept the other half, the half that is essential for the soul to have eternal life. The breath that is the most valuable possession of every person in this life, the breath that works as fuel for the next life. The room immediately filled with a heavenly fragrance. I do not know if it was due to the breath that he breathed out or the one that he retained. The first was the affirmation of a holy life. The second is the promise to the eternal future. In some miraculous manner, his body maintained its flexibility and warmth and exuded the scent of his sanctity in a form of consolation. Our eyes are filled with tears. We're not lamenting the one who had departed. We felt sorrow for those who remained. Story number 8. An abbot in one of the monasteries narrated a similar story. He was very moved and he spoke about that. In his monastery there was a monk who was fairly remiss. He rarely went to services. He would go into the church, venerate the icons, and then disappear. He was as if he could not remain in one place for long. Nobody knew where he went. Nobody knew what he did. And he had another failing. He drank. His breath always smelled of wine. He did not bother anyone. He never spoke ill of anyone, but his life was not the life of a monk. The year passed, and he died. The brotherhood was plunged in agony, anguish for his soul and for his salvation. He had left unprepared. He had not taken communion for years, at least as far as they could tell. They spent the night in heartfelt prayer, their eyes filled with tears. The moment of the burial arrived. The monks surrounding his dead body were not lamenting the fact that they were lost him, as much as suffering because of his spiritual condition of his death. But at the moment when they lowered him into the tomb, instead of taking a last look at the monk, they are all glanced to each other in wonder. The most simple-hearted of the brothers broke the unword silence. Elder, he says, his body is giving out a fragrance, he said, expressing that everyone was thinking and not one dared to admit. And indeed, the air was filled with a wonderful fragrance. For days afterwards, his grave bore witness to some hidden magnificence and affirmed the mystery of God. He who has smelt of wine in his life gave out the aroma of divine grace and compensation. Beyond outward appearances and behind his weaknesses, there lay concealed the treasure of a saintly life and a monastic soul who now prays for his fellow monks and in whom the Spirit of God forever dwells. Story number 9. Back on my part of my youth, I'm 19 years old, first year at the university. And in Mount Athos, this time, I meet somebody unexpectedly. That was Father St. Paisius. I think that it was a privilege at that time to have a relationship from that young age with Father Paisius, almost until his death. We had over 10 meetings with him. But what was the first time that I met him? I'm visiting the monastery of Stavronikita in Mount Athos, where is Father Vasilios, the famous Father Vasilios, was the abbot at that time. He was insisting to me, I'm 19 years old, first year of the university in Thessaloniki, that if I have the opportunity, I have to meet Father St. Paisius now. I said to him, I would like that very much, but how you can do this? Father Vasilius answered, God will provide. And it was really by coincidence. There is no coincidence. There is only providence. So I was on the way by foot from Stavronikita to Karies, to the capital city. It's about an hour and a half of walking. Somewhere on the middle of that road, I meet in the opposite direction with a monk, a simple monk that I don't recognize. I don't recognize his face. But we come closer and closer, and I see his face, he sees my face, and he's reacting in a very unique way. He gets a flower and comes and gives it to me. Just that. And we continue our way. when I spoke to Father Vasilis about that, you said you saw Father Saint Porphyrios. It was him. And I realized that much later on. Then I wanted very much to meet him again. So really, it's an unbelievable responsibility to say that we became friends. He was calling me not Yanni, but Yanaki, the small John. And of course, from that time, I met him quite a few times, and we had incredible dialogues, incredible exchanges. I thought many times to write them down, but perhaps that was my will. When I asked the abbess of the monastery of Suroti, which is outside Thessaloniki and where is the tomb of St. Paisius, she said to me, later on, not now. And I follow her advice. Not now, but at least I will tell you one or two of the small stories related to St. Paisius or Elder Paisius at that time. And the last time that I met him before I came to Canada was just to inform him that I decided to come for graduate studies in Canada. And we met in his small house there. And he told me, "What are you doing now, Yanaki?" I said, I decided, or I thought that it's a good idea to go to Canada to have graduate studies. He said, "For how long are you going?" I said, "For 2 years, to do the master's." And he says to me, "You'll stay long." I'm still here 45 years after. Then I want to turn the discussion into something else, into something more to distract him a little bit. Couldn't distract him at all. I said to him in a very semi-serious way, "Father, I want to stay with you here. Can you take me?" I saw him immediately that he changed his eyes, his expression, and he was thinking. What he is thinking, I said. I asked him something simple, he can give me an answer. He's thinking and thinking, and I was waiting and waiting. So I asked him in simple terms, "Can I stay here? I love it here. It's beautiful, with you, And after a certain minutes of reflection, he comes to me and he says, "I will tell you a secret. But that secret, you'll not tell even your wife." At that time, I asked him to stay. And he was talking to me about a wife. And that secret, I will not have to reveal to my wife. And I didn't so far. Saint Paisius, Saint Porphyrios, Saint Joseph the Hesychast, they live in the Holy Spirit. They live that life that we wish to live. These are the examples that we have today, and it's not examples of the 3rd century and the 4th century. There is examples of people who are still even alive today. And we can meet them, we can discuss them, and we can read their writings, and be with them. Most of them are well kept and they are unknown, and it's much better that they are like that. They are so humble that they don't want to be recognized by anybody. And they want to be this unknown Father Mitrovan and Father George and whatever X and Y that they lived their lives. But of course, uh, many, many times, believe me, I'm asking to myself the question, why me? And of course, the answers are not easy, are not simple, are not like that. But no matter what, at least I feel that responsibility. The responsibility to, when we're talking about the Orthodox tradition, to talk about in a proper terms. Don't water it down, this kind of stuff. Don't make it what they're not. Present them in your, in mine, in whatever capacity, as much as you can, respecting what the church is saying. You have to do it through obedience to the church, not to obedience to people. People can be right, can be wrong, can be having opinions, can have this, can be the other. But not the sense of the church. Not the people that whatever they say, whatever they, then it's part of their lives. Of course, I admit that I was present on the famous episode with St. Paisius, that a lot of books are referring to, etc. When he was there, he was meeting with a group of people, sitting in some small trees there, and it was a very strict fasting day, and he came out with a big jar of milk to make everybody, wondering what is happening. And he put it in 5 small containers for the small fishes, the fish that are around, the small fish, serpents, the small serpents that are around to go and snakes to go and eat their and drink their milk. I was in front of them, and he says, "What are you doing, Father? This is all creatures of the one Creator. These are my friends. You are not afraid? What to be afraid? From the creatures of God? You have to be afraid for the proud people, not from this." So all the life was like that. Father Paisius finished the 3rd grade of the elementary school. He didn't know how to read and write. He wrote a book of his spiritual father, which is Father Arseni, and when he gave it to Father Vasilios to read it, Father Vasilios was laughed because it was full of orthographic mistakes. It was 5 mistakes in one word, because he couldn't write properly. And Father Vasilios says, "My goodness, for the first time in my life, I'm correcting holy mistakes." And that was the case. And that book then became a treasure of the book of this century. Saint Arsenius of Cappadocia, his spiritual father, who became a saint also of the church. Now, story number 10. Extremely important to me and very, very, very interesting. It's the last story. I can tell you many, many other stories, but there's not much time anyhow. It's concerning a monk, a Serbian monk, by the name Stefan. Stefan lives on the desert, alone, in a place called Karulia. Is the crotch of the desert. Very, very difficult area. Very difficult to go there. You have to pass through chains, through this, through the other. I am with a friend of mine, Lazarus. He's a doctor in Greece. He was a doctor. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago. Very, very good friend, very close friend of mine. And we were at the monastery of St. Paul, which is the last monastery before the desert. We are, I think, 3rd or 4th year of university, at that kind of stage. We visit different monasteries, we visit St. Paul, and we heard many things about this monk, Stefan, the Serbian, who lives, somewhere in a cave, it's difficult to find him. So myself and Lazarus, my friend, we have a great, great desire to go and see him, to see what it's all about, what the people are saying. But unfortunately, happens that this week that we're there is Holy Week, and actually was the Lazarus after the Lazarus Saturday, Palm Sunday. It was at that time. So we went. We asked the people then in the monastery of Saint Paul how we supposed to go there and how much time do we need to go to come back, etc., to not make sure that we'll not be left in the desert. They told us exactly it's about that area, it's about this, you have to go this way, this way. All right, we decide one morning, it's now Holy Week, I think it was Tuesday. We decide, let's early in the morning go and we'll try to meet him, whatever discussions we can have, I don't know what we expect. But anyhow, we'll see him for a little bit while and come back. And finally, we decided to do that. We early left the monastery. We took us a little bit. We were lost here and there. Finally, we arrived at that place by an hour and a half, probably by foot. We arrived at his house. This is probably that's his house. Let's knock at the door. We knock at the door. No answer. Nothing. It was a small window. Let's see if there is anybody inside. We don't see anything. All right, let's stay for a little bit. We knock again and knock again to see if that's possible. We continue. We stay for over half an hour for sure. We knock a few times. Nothing. No answer. No sign of anybody living around. Nothing. So I said, well, what are we supposed to do now? I said, there's nothing else to be done. We can knock a last time to see if there's by any chance is a response. Otherwise, we have to go back. We did it again, nothing happened. All right, we have to go back. Very disappointed. We took the road, we come back. We arrived there exhausted. They put us to eat. And we asked the father, we went there, we spent 2 hours to go, etc. All this time, nobody. Huh. The monk was laughing at us. Huh. I said, what that means, what did we do? Do anything wrong? What? I said, Father, why you are laughing? We're telling you that, Oh, he says, you have to insist. If you didn't insist, nothing will happen. To insist? What do you mean to insist? Okay, we thought about it. We went to our rooms. We thought about it. I said to us, what do you mean to insist? We have to knock for 2 hours there? What are we supposed to do? Oh, probably we have to go back again. All right. Next morning, we decide, we'll go back again. We'll knock again. We'll see what will happen. The same story happens again. Exactly the same as the first story. Knock, look, nothing. No sign of anything outside, nothing inside. Now, really disappointed, we come back. And we see the same monk who laughed at us. And we say, listen, Father, we did it again. It's too much, we can't do anything else, Okay. That is not my jurisdiction, says the monk. Ask the abbot. What do you have permission to, do? Anyhow, said, let's go and ask the abbot. Why not? We went there, the abbot was busy, or he was looking busy, and he didn't want to answer to us, he didn't, whatever. Finally, we asked him the question, Father, we came here, we want to see that father, we heard so many things about him, etc., etc., that's the story. He said, listen, you guys, you are young guys, you did a mistake. I said, what mistake did you do? You went Holy Tuesday and Holy Wednesday? How are you supposed to? You'll go after Pascha. Oh, I said, that was probably the mistake. Let's stay in the monastery of St. Paul for a few more days. Good Friday, beautiful services, Saturday, Sunday, and after the resurrection, let's try again to see if this Sabbath is right or not. And that's what we did. We spent beautiful days then in St. Paul Monastery, services, people, happiness, the resurrection, procession. That was in the evening, of course, and in the morning, Sunday morning, like the mare bears, we said, let's go now and go and see. We went, we knock at the door, no answer. We knock at the door, no answer. But suddenly, I see a figure inside. I said, he's inside. He doesn't open. But I saw him. He's there. So I said, we'll insist. We insisted. And he opened. And what we saw, it's an unexpressible vision. We saw somebody who was an older, very old monk, full of light. Full of light that later on in my studies, I discovered that this is the uncreated light. And he says one thing to us, Christos voskreσε. And we said to him, Christos anesti. And he repeated, Christos anesti. And then he make a sign, we see him. It's like I see him in front of me now. It's not stories. The uncreated light is not something that people believing on it. This is the reality of the other world that is revealing this world to the saints of the church. He make a sign after that, come in. Come in where? We went into one room and then a small corridor. That was all. There is no place to sit, there is no place, etc. There is one small kind of bed, but it's not bed really. So I sat down there and Lazarus sat on the other side. He disappeared outside himself, Stefan. And after 5 minutes, he came with two old, how you call it, tins from cans, with tins with cans, with water. And he brought us to drink. That was the only thing that he had. We stayed about 10 minutes there. I couldn't see him face to face. And then we didn't have anything else to do. As the church says, without voice, as fish without voice. We couldn't say anything. To say what? After 10 minutes, we say, Christos anesti, Christos voskreσε. We left and he closed the door. Of course, how can, in my simple words, can I explain the unexplainable? How you can do that? When the church says that the Virgin Mary is η χώρα του αχωρήτου, the space of the uncontainable. We say it here, more precious than the heaven. Η πλατύτερα, we say in Greek. You're the more white than the heavens. How that kind of type of approaching of experience, you can put it in words or you can explain it. You cannot, I think. You can only live it. It's good when you read it on books of somebody else's experience, yes. But it's not first hand, it's second hand, third hand. All of them are valuable, yes. But it's totally different because that kind of stamp, it's in your soul and you cannot take it out. No matter what. People having that they say, I'm a communist, I'm an atheist, I'm this and that. I say, I don't care what you are. The problem is what you are missing. You are missing an incredible reality, which is what we believe is the reality. I don't care about the rest. The rest are really garbage. It's nothing important. This is the important. And actually, it's not important for somebody else to live, but it's the important for you and me to live. And that's the beauty of the church. Does not go back into the 3rd and 4th century, all the saints and all this tradition, but says, today our people are living like that, right? We didn't have the example of Saint Seraphim of Sarov in Russia. One person saved the entire nation. The same thing in Serbia with Father Justin Popovic. The same thing in most of the other places. Why? Because that kind of presence and witness saves the world. Dostoevsky, the beauty will save the world. Cannot be otherwise. So I chose only to say 10 small stories for you. As you can see, I mean, you can imagine that you can write books about that, but you have to be very careful. There's a lot of things written down, and many times what is written is full of ego and full of our own ideas. And that's not what is the church all about. The church is not about our ideas. It's to bring our ideas and our will, like Father said there, we are the will, but the will needs to be moved to work. The will needs to move, but not only to move on the right direction. If you move it in the wrong direction, you don't get anything. If you have a will without movement, there is nothing also to be done. It's like you have a heart, but you don't use it. You don't use it. And the will to the movement, to the direction is really what the Father says, put your heart, your mind into your heart. That's the whole trick, the whole game of us here on this earth. Can we manage to put this mind into the heart? Then everything is in movement, everything is in motion. I will, just as a concluding part, I will read you something. Athos has often been described as the spiritual heart of Orthodoxy. It is worth pausing really to consider exactly what the phrase means in practice. It means that throughout its history, the Holy Mountain has drawn men from far and wide to come and experience for themselves its seclusion, its sanctity, and the teaching of the Holy Fathers. Some have come to stay in Mount Athos, but many have returned to the outside world, changed by the strength of the spiritual gifts that they received there, and inspired to make use of those gifts in whatever way they can. In many instances, they have gone on to find other monasteries in other places on the world, which have turned again became centers of spirituality. Sometimes gradually, sometimes remarkably rapidly, a network of such centers can be seen to have spread all over the heartlands of the Orthodox world and even beyond. As spiritual fathers have attracted and inspired groups of disciples who have in turn become spiritual fathers to new groups of disciples who have carried the torch of Athonite monasticism to parts of the world which it had never previously illumined. This monastic diaspora, it's called the Athonite Commonwealth. Everything that the Holy Mountain has to offer is experienced by monks, by pilgrims alike, as a wonder and as a surprise, as an unprecedented encounter which cannot by lived want I'm unmoved. Its message transcends human logic. It inspires and stirs within your unexpected visions and hope. How marvelous is to live the spiritual life as a constant godly surprise. Thank you all very much. I didn't hear you. Sorry. I didn't hear you. Yeah, about about 10 or 15 years ago, we make a course at the university, pilgrimage to Mount Athos, and we went with a group of 35 people in a bus, and we went to different places in Greece, even Meteora, Thessaloniki, then Constantinople, and then the men went into Mount Athos, and the women went to women monasteries in different places, and it was very, very well received. A lot of people asked me to do it again, God willing.
Because some people are watching online so they can hear you too.
I have a tendency to shout to begin with, so I'll try not to speak too loud. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, Doctor. I don't know if you recall, but I joked with you a couple of days ago, last week, that I paid $40, so I hope you were going to impress me. I can say you succeeded in that. I leave slightly transformed than I started the day. So my question for you is that Alexander Press is certainly a noteworthy publication in Canada and North America. And now, having learned a little bit more about your personal connection to Mount Athos, would you say that this hagiography that you shared with us, even brief as the one you have given us is the central vehicle for the inspiration for Alexander Press? Or do you understand the question?
Yes, and I think, yes, is right. But more, if we put a little bit in a more general terms, because, thank God, and with the providence of God, we have been exposed to the Orthodox tradition in such an incredible way, we cannot avoid the responsibility to pass it on to small and big and, in whatever ways. This kind of lecture that we did today, it's the fourth time that I do in the last 3 months in Montreal. I did it in Greek in two places, in French, in English. Why? If you feel that it's like it's given to you a treasure and it is not for you, it's for the entire world. They're missing that part. They're looking for this part. I don't care about the books, hundreds of books that we're selling. I care about your question and your interest into this. And to tell me that I'm interested in this subject. And having the experience of Father Theoklitos, I will say, you're interested in this subject. There is no one reference. There's 100 references. Check them, be informed. And leave the questions aside. I'm this, I'm the other, I'm political, I'm left, I'm right. What left and right? Here we're talking about something that is so incredibly rich that all the rest of the questions are absolutely secondary. So, what, what is the principal question? You see, the principal question is that you and I and all of us, we have to be transformed into that incredible, beautiful light that the church is talking about. It's not theories. This is the reality. And we have a life to do it. And don't say, no, it's not for me, it's for him. No, no, no. There's no excuse. It's for everybody, especially the good unknown ones, like Father Mitrofann, like Father George. Nobody knew about them. Nobody. But he counts that he knows about. That's all what counts more.
First experience in Holy Mountain, it was complete mystery to me. 2015, I think we were in a conference. I went to Dr. John. I said, Dr. John, how can you get me to Mount Athos? He said, oh, it's very simple. Just send me a copy of your passport. He said, we're going next year. You can join us. Okay. Meet us in Oranopolis on August 3rd, near the port. the whole summer, we were in 4 cities in Europe, in Bulgaria, Romania, I don't know. Last week, we spent it in Greece, me and my wife. We finished. She flew back to Montreal. I went to Thessaloniki, Oranopoli. But I was very nervous. You know, I stayed in a hotel, very small hotel. I asked about the permit, where did you get it? But I was very nervous. What if Dr. John doesn't show up? You know, several months later. No. And I collected my permit at 7 in the morning. They ask you, you're Orthodox? Yes. So you pay 25 euros instead of 45 or 50 if you're Catholic, I think. And I went out waiting. All of a sudden, I look, I see Dr. John with the 3 boys and your brother, I think, Manolatos?
Menelos.
Oh, I was so relieved. I was so relieved. I'm saved. So he said, come on, don't worry, let's have breakfast. We went in for breakfast. Then we took the boat to Iveron. It was my first experience. I had a superb room. Then I started to become confident. I was talking about it all the time, about my experience and stuff like that. But one thing I can definitely share what you said earlier. When you stand up at 3 in the morning and you finish at 6:30 and you don't get tired, there is a reason for it. You get elevated. You know, I understand liturgy in Greek, but I don't understand the Bible and the prayers and everything else. But it's enough to close your eyes, lower your head, and let go. And certainly, it's true. And this experience, I confess to it all the time. The second year, the same year in Iveron, I met a Russian pilgrim that I've already seen on the boat when we were together. And he came with his son and his friend. He speaks hardly any English. I was making coffee downstairs in the cafeteria, you know that place? When we go down, there is a small, and I offered them coffee. And they were happy, yes. I gave them Greek coffee, and we started to chat and talk, and very, very nice, but they're very, 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 very rigid Orthodox. I mean, you don't take communion if you don't fast for 3 years and you prepare for it. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of people. We connected, we exchanged contacts, even though with limited English. All of a sudden, they came to visit us in March, the year after, here in Montreal. Then they invited us. We went to see them. I think we spent Easter in 2018 in Moscow. And then he said, I'm going to Mount Athos. He goes 3, 4, 5 times a year, because they have a summer residence in Bulgaria, and it's very easy to drive to come. He said, I want to go to Simona Petras. He couldn't make it. I said, yes, I can take you. He said, how can you take me? I said, I met Father Iakovos in Ottawa, and he's from Simona Petras. So he said, send me your passport. I sent you his passport, and you get us the visa for the 2 of us. So we went there. I went to Simona Petras without a reservation. We show up. Do you have a reservation? No, we don't. But I know Father Iakovos. I had a photo with me with Father Iakovos, and I show it to them to make them to believe me that I know him. So when they came back, said, sorry, we can't talk to him. He's in seclusion. You cannot stay here. But I tell you, to get up on foot, it took us an hour and a half. There was no way for me to go back. I said, no problem. You don't have any rooms. I'll stay here on the floor. Just give me a pillow and I'll sleep on the floor. They realized they couldn't get rid of me. I said, I'm not going back. I will not go down. I cannot go down. So they took a few minutes. They came back. They said, yes, we found you a room. And they gave us a room with 2 beds. Time passed. The year after, I had another doctor from here, Montreal. He wants to go to Mount Athos. I will take you. He tried to get his visa through the bishops and his connections. He couldn't do it in a month. I told him, stop wasting your time. Send me your passport. He sent me his passport. I sent it to you. He got us the 2 visas, and we went. But this time we had the invitation to Simono Petras.
So what is your question now?
My question is,
Sharing the
don't-
experience.
So it's sharing
Good.
the experience like you. We
Excellent.
go to Simono Petras, and they look at me, they recognize me right away. He said, you again? You have reservation? So after that, we did 4 monasteries. We did Vatopedi, Iveron, we went to Iveron, and we finished with the Russian monastery. So
Thank you very much.
what can I say? It's really, and it's
Personal
different.
experiences, that's good.
Just one last one, and last year we spent Easter in Serbia and Montenegro, and we went to Ostrog. It's another monastery of St. Basil. I highly recommend if anybody is in that area.
Thank you. Other questions?
Don't worry.
Elias.
I'll bring it over there.
My question is related to the holy life of monks within the monasteries. Excuse me. You talked about food, and what I'm trying to give you as a question, we focus today on Mount Athos. How inclusive are you with all other monasteries throughout the ancient church, whether in Near East, especially Egypt, where there are big monasteries over there, including St. Catherine's. Is there a communion between Mount Athos, holy place, and other monasteries, whether it's St. Catherine or others, monasteries throughout Egypt, as well as in Syria, in Turkey, as well as definitely in Palestine? Jericho is come to my mind because there are 2 monasteries who are very, I think they are very well known by you as well. So I'm talking about the communion in what you talked about and those other monasteries. One of them that I know that you know and you've been there is Jericho. Thank you.
There is an absolutely beautiful connection between all this. The Orthodox world is one, never has been divided, never will be divided, no matter how many times people try to divide it. They cannot do it because what unites them is Christ. And it's the same direction. In other words, the will who has a movement and has a direction, the direction is exactly the same. Monastic life in the icebergs of Alaska or in Siberia or the Middle East is exactly the same. There is no significance. And not only that, the communion that all these parts have is Eucharist. That's what unites us. And that can never be broken. They try, all kinds of people in history so far, they couldn't do anything. 70 years of communism in Russia. They kill everybody. They stop everybody. They close the monasteries. What did they succeed? Nothing. In a few years after, there are more than has been before. The unity is not based on agreement or disagreement. It's based on a person, which is Christ. That's the unity of the church. That can never be shaken. And the commonality of this is, you know, Saint Porphyrius. Saint Porphyrius lived in Athens. Saint Paisius lived in Mount Athos. Saint Silouan lived in Mount Athos. Saint Sophronius lived in Essex. They communicate with each other. They don't speak the same language. They don't are in the same country. But what is behind and gives them life, which is the Spirit, is the same. And is the one, and it's never been divided. Christ says that. No matter what you do in your divisions, you are one. If you are with me. If you want to be in your own, let's be in your own. And you will have the consequences of that. And we do. We have Ukrainians and Russians, the same faith, fighting. It's not the Ukrainians and the Russians that are fighting. This is the wrong that is fighting. Because the good will remain no matter what. Even if you kill millions of people. Nothing will change. What has been changed is pronounced by us, is the resurrection, is the victory over death. Is that persons, the two people that I mentioned the stories here, how they die in Mount Athos. I have been in one funeral in Mount Athos, and I couldn't express to you how beautiful it was. People with smiles, you know, are giving their friend, their brother, into the hands of Christ. They feel that is the most normal thing to do. To be sorrow for what? That this person is with him now? Why? So, the funeral service is, they call it toxodi in Greek. In other words, the exit. But it has a different kind of meaning. What kind of exit is that? If you don't believe in the next life, this life does not have any meaning. Any meaning at all. And because of that, your question is very interesting actually, because there is a unity in this world. Beyond language, beyond culture, tradition, etc., etc. And it's Him who makes the essence of the unity. Only on Him we are all one. We're all one. And will remain one, no matter what. Wars, catastrophes. It's nothing. It's nothing at the end. Yes.
Merci beaucoup. Dr. John, je voulais vous remercier pour votre témoignage. J'ai été très touchée, là, j'avais envie de pleurer à plusieurs reprises. Je voulais vous dire, c'est drôle la vie, parce que la semaine dernière, j'étais en train de lire le livre de Saint Séraphin de Sarov. Puis je me disais, justement hier, je me disais, comme c'est difficile le chemin de sainteté, veiller, jeûner, prier, c'est plus accessible. Mais jeûner comme eux, ils jeûnent, veiller comme eux, ils veillent. Je me demandais si vous, avec votre expérience au mont Athos, est-ce que le jeûne et la veille, c'est plus facile pour vous?
Moi?
Oui, parce que justement, je veux dire, vous êtes touché par la grâce, c'est clair pour
Tous,
moi.
on tous ont été par la grâce.
Je
La grâce,
sais.
ce n'est pas quelque chose de personnel.
Non, je sais, mais
C'est donné à l'Église. Et l'Église le donne. Mais pour le recevoir, il faut l'accepter. Il faut dire oui à cette direction. Moi, j'ai l'intention. J'ai l'intention, cela veut dire le mouvement, c'est la volonté. Oui, j'ai la volonté. Mais la volonté, pourquoi? Pour quelle raison? Quelle est la direction? Si la direction, c'est ce qu'il faut, ça veut dire le Christ, alors il y a du sens à tout ce qu'on fait. Quand le Christ a dit, la parole de Christ elle-même, il disait, tu ne peux pas vivre sans jeûne et sans prière, c'est lui qui le donne. Il dit que tu peux le faire n'importe que, mais si tu me demandes, je te dis que ça, c'est la façon la plus élaborée pour toi. Si tu veux Fais ça, alors tu vas gagner tous les fruits de cette obédience. Ça, c'est tout. Et ce qu'on fait, c'est seulement de dire oui à l'obéissance à l'Église sur ça. Par exemple, je vais vous donner un petit exemple. Et en Alaska, quand on jeûne, ils font quoi? Ils ne mangent pas de poissons. Parce que c'est les poissons qu'ils ont. Alors il manque qu'ils ont vraiment, abondantes là-bas. C'est ça l'esprit que l'on fait. Alors, les Indiens aussi à Alaska, ils disent que quand il y a un chasseur qui va chasser un animal, des choses comme ça, c'est l'animal qu'il donne lui-même au casseur pour être tué, pour être mangé par lui comme une offre. Mon Dieu! Alors il devient un sacrifice. Il devient quelque chose de différent. Il devient quelque chose de sacré. Et c'est ça qui c'est vraiment le cas. La jeûne et tout ce que ça, il devient quelque chose de sacré. Ce n'est pas que Dieu te dit, tu ne faut pas manger de ça, tu manges quelque chose d'autre. Mais ce n'est pas ça la jeûne. La jeûne, c'est la jeûne de l'œil, la jeûne de l'oreille, la jeûne de que tu parles. C'est ça la jeûne. Mais tu commences avec la jeûne de la nourriture, parce que ça, c'est le commencement. Si tu ne commences pas par ça, tu ne peux pas venir à l'autre. Alors tu commences avec ça en disant que oui, je comprends maintenant, je fais un effort de ne pas manger ça, mais il faut que je vraiment vois qu'est-ce que j'écoute, qu'est-ce que je dis, qu'est-ce que je... C'est ça l'idée centrale. Alors si on fait ça, on vient chez lui. On montre qu'on va vers la vraie direction. On a la roue, mais on conduit avec un mouvement, le mouvement du cerveau qui va à la cœur. Et maintenant, c'est la propre direction qu'il faut suivre.
Merci beaucoup.
D'autres, oui. Thank you so much for your stories. It's really touched my heart. I think everyone feel almost the same. I just can't tell what I feel. You told that three things for men, right? It's heart, move, and direction. What do you think? What three things for women?
Well, it's the same. There is no difference. There is no question of
Thank you.
gender.
Thank you so much.
There is no question of gender at all. It's for everybody. It's for, human being in the general terms, what we call in Greek anthropos. Anthropos is the general terms, the human being. There's no differentiation. Why? We are very simple. Christ told us what will be in paradise. In paradise, there is no men and women. There is no married or not married. There is no this, there is no food. You are passing through the doors. This is the new life. And this is not a theory. It's what Christ showed us after the resurrection. He is coming. He is going with a new body. The new body that is the resurrected body. The body which we will have. That does not make a difference. In other words, he is telling us something even much deeper of what we think. The marriage is something of this world. You see, there will not be this, there will not be the other. Because that is our purpose and possibility to arrive at that stage. And if we arrive, we don't need that.
Sorry, my question, yes, you are right. But for example, if I want to come to monastery, they're over there, and I just realized that I'm not sure about every monastery, but one monastery over there, it's just only for men.
Yeah. They are all for men here.
Yeah.
Yeah, which means it's a blessing. It's a blessing not for men, but for women also. It is a blessing. It is a blessing because shows you that it's not the place, it's the way, it's the manner. And the way and the manner is not dependent on space and place. It's not dependent on gender. Around Mount Athos, in the area, in the mainland, there's hundreds of women monasteries. Some of them are bigger than Mount Athos. Ormilia, which is an hour from this, 200 nuns. The best community that we can imagine. Outside their monastery in Ormilia, the monastery in Ormilia, they have a medical center with all the specialities, which is free for all the people. That's what they give. And they are run by the nuns. The concept is totally different. They transform their lives. You go there and everything is free because it's given to the people. Because they felt this, you know. And that was always the case. Always was the case. The first hospital has been done by the church in Constantinople. The first really idea of a hospital has been established by St. Basil. What do you think? From where all these ideas came from? St. Basil, by himself in Caesarea, right, in Cappadocia, every day he was giving communion to lepers. St. Basil. These are the people that we're projecting. We're putting on icons. This is the, you know, the heroes of the faith. They're not, you know, they are people that they can be not educated at all and can be the people at the top of the line. There is no distinction between them. There's no distinction between Father Paisius, who just finished elementary school, and somebody else who has 5 PhDs. You know. That is really in another level. The point is how much you transform your own life that then can be examples to others. You said something that I'm taking that opportunity to say one word. You said some of the stories is touching us. You see, this is a very beautiful biblical terminology. The woman who had the problem with the blood, he just touched Christ. He didn't do anything else. He went secretly without people noticing and he touched the garments of Christ. That was all. The touching. So, to be touched, that means that your heart develops that kind of sensitivity and is enjoying it. Because that is what our soul has been built for. Has been built for that beauty. And when we see the beauty, we recognize it simply and we say, yes, I'm touched by that because I feel that I'm in the same world, in the same environment, in the same, you see, and this is the beauty of the unity of the church. The unity of the church is that kind of beauty. You read something in another language that you never said, in another culture, and you feel the affiliation, you feel the connection. That's the Holy Spirit that works through this. And then you feel that kind of connection. You feel touching. And of course, Christ, people around him, only that woman touched the garments. And Christ says, I felt a power came out of me. It was not just a simple touch. A power came out of him because he felt the faith of that woman. He says, by touching, I do much more. I don't need anything else. I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to argue with you. I just need to touch you. And we're touched. And sometimes this is the beauty, is that when you are touched really hard, it's like a stamp. There's no place for arguments. Sometimes I feel so blessed to discuss with, strict Jews, strict atheists, and to see their arguments. Their arguments are so low compared to what is our spirituality that you cannot say anything, you have to laugh, There's no reason for that. And our only opposition to that is we have to present the proper witness. They have to see on us what the Christians are believing. And if they see on us, they are touched. They are touched.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Maybe one more
Why
question. I'm not sure that maybe it's not like topics of this event, but my question about when you understand what is your goal of life. Thank you.
Yes, all our lives we're searching for that. And we'll never be 100% sure of that. But we have somebody that we trust. And that is our basis. You see, to develop trust is a very, very big thing. Can you develop a trust for your bank, for your lawyer, for your doctor? It's totally different if you get a trust for your Lord. Then that changes everything. Lord, I trust you. Bring whatever. Even if it's something that I don't understand, I have to accept it because that's who you are. And if I don't understand it, it's not your fault, it's my fault. And as long as that trust is developed more and more and more, that's all what it is. The trust that we are not in this earth for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. If that is what it is garbage, it's nothing. There's no reason for that, to become soil as we become. But we have to build for eternity. And that's the beauty. And if we want to live with him in eternity, we'll live with him in eternity. Yes.
Thank you, Yanni, very
Okay.
much. You understand why we put this theme for today, because Mount Athos is not just a monastery, it is not just a space or a place, it is a way of life which is for all of us and which touches each one of us in a different way. But the principles of living in the church, a life of chastity, obedience, poverty, accepting the will of God and trying to turn our will to His will is the most significant thing. And Lent is a special period in our lives every year that is given to us in that purpose. And I would like to close now with something that Father Vasilios Gondikakis, the Archimandrite, previously abbot of Stavronikita in Iviron, had written once that touched me very personally. He said, in the church, we don't need to do anything. We just need to be in the church, in the services, follow what the church is showing us, and just be like the plant under the Mediterranean sun, accepting the heat and taking the sun and expecting the rain, and just stick there and stay. And if we do that, we grow like the fetus in the uterus of the mother that does nothing but breathe. Just stay there and do nothing but breathe. It still brings me goosebumps after, I think I read it probably 40 years ago, but those are some of the things that mark our lives. So thank you very much. Now I invite everyone to go downstairs for a break, and we have the movie. Yes, because we have plenty of snacks, and we have cake and dessert and all that from the monastery. And I think at 4 o'clock, I think you are behind. There's a problem with your watch. That's why now I realize this is not the right time that you have there. It's 3:30. Okay. Okay. So at 4 o'clock, is that okay? Is it okay? So at 4 o'clock we come back for the movie on Mount Athos.
ça. Tu vois, pas. Apparemment, c'est super bon. Ah oui, 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 on en avait parlé.
Et carré comme ça, c'était celui-là, parce qu'il est un peu tout long. Mais presque tous les monastères sont plus ou moins tout longs. Mais il y a plusieurs styles de vie à l'intérieur du grand monastère. C'est pour ça qu'il y a ça de l'or. Puis il y a le catholicat au centre, où c'est tout le monde. À certaines fins, parce qu'ils ont tous chacun leur chemin aussi.
Et c'est ça que j'ai raconté. C'est qu'on a parlé de symbole.
Oui, c'est une
Et puis le truc, c'était quoi déjà?
hérétique.
Ouais, c'est ça, genre soit seul, soit tous
Ouais.
ensemble.
Ouais.
Ça, j'avais aimé ça, parce que
Puis les skits, c'est moitié-moitié.
ouais,
C'est des
ouais.
petits groupes, ils ont une grande part de vie solitaire,
Ouais,
mais ils
c'est
se
ça.
réunissent aussi à certains moments.
Ben, moi, les skits que j'ai vus, ils mangeaient ensemble.
Oui.
Ils faisaient la liturgie ensemble. Après, le travail, ouais, ça s'organise aussi. Enfin, je sais pas. Pour moi, skit, c'est petit monastère, en fait.
Oui.
Mais sous l'autorité d'un autre monastère. Enfin, c'est ça que j'avais vu, moi. Je sais pas si à quel point c'est vrai. Parce que t'as un monastère qui a... En fait, c'est sous l'autorité d'un... Il y a quand même une autorité hiérarchique. C'est pas juste un mec qui fait son chef.
Ah, ouais.
Il y a un archevêque, ou je sais pas.
Ben, lui, il était juge un archevêque, parce
Ouais.
qu'ils ont dit messiérès, c'est l'archevêque de Roumanie.
De Roumanie?
Oui,
Ok, ok.
ses restes sont partis de là, il n'est plus là. Là, ben, probablement qu'une partie de ses os vont être à la maison. Pour que ses frères puissent
Ouais.
le vénérer, eux aussi. On ne sait pas. Mais là, ça va attendre de 2024-2025 parce qu'ils veulent faire une grande canonisation de tous les martyrs qu'il y a eu en Roumanie pendant
Ah,
le
ils vont le faire
communisme.
ensemble?
Oui, tout le monde en même temps.
Là, j'ai vu...
Ça va être la grosse foire.
Ouais. Et là, j'ai vu, ils vont canoniser le père spirituel de Saint Aïsios, Tikhon.
Ah,
Ouais, qui était un russe. Je sais pas quand ils vont le faire. Il avait parlé d'Arsenios, mais Arsenios, je crois qu'il est déjà canonisé. C'était celui qui a baptisé Aïsios. Ouais, la Cappadocie. Ah, ça doit être un ski, ça.
c'est gros pour un ski. C'est assez petit. Parce que le ski, où est-ce que c'est que moi, de guerre d'été, était juste 12.
Ouais, ouais.
C'est le maximum.
Moi, j'ai vu 2. C'était 2 en France, le ski.
Ah, oui. C'est une différente grandeur, là. Mais eux le ski roumain, c'était 12 ans. Puis au bout de 14 ans, il y avait 3 Québécois.
Ah ouais?
Moi, Pierre, il y avait
Ah oui, tu m'en avais parlé.
Moïse, puis l'autre, c'était, je ne me rappelle plus.
C'est celui qui est à Nova Scotia, là.
Ouais,
C'est Pierre. C'est un autre.
non, Pierre, il est en Ontario.
Celui qui est à Nova Scotia, là, je sais plus comment il s'appelle.
Oui.
Luc.
Luc, c'est ça, c'est Luc. Pas Luc qui était ici, Luc. T'as vu Luc qui était ici?
Non.
Il va se il est grand.
Ah, ok.
Il est recté en même temps parce que sa conjointe était mourante du cancer.
La seule personne que j'ai rencontrée, c'était...
Ben non, oui,
Ah, moi, il faut que j'aille pisser, je sais pas si je vais le voir.
Yeah, but this is a zoom in of this. Look, yes. Yeah. This is this. Yes. So this is where the hotel is at. No, it's way back. It's way back. Yes. There is snow in the winter. This is the peak of, from time to time, the Virgin Mary appears on the mountain. This is the top of the mountain. This is what it looks like. This cross is here. Yes, this mountain. But you really need to be fit to be. لا لسه أنا طلعت سانت كاترين بس I was much. It was 20. How many meters? Saint Catherine? Saint Catherine it takes 4 hours. 4 hours. سانت نصها بالجمل نصها No, أنا طلعتها كلها ماشي. I was fit back then. It was 1999. 1999 is another story. No, 1999 it's like 1999, 13 years. أكثر 24 years. 24 years ago. 24 years. 24 years ago I was fit. I was really fit. Mount Fuji. Oh yeah, but I was fit. Mount Fuji we made 600 meters and that was about it. We couldn't go higher. But I tell you when I went on Mount Sinai, Germain was on the camello, on the camel. And I was had the camel and I was the same speed of the camel. Just to give you an idea. Yeah, I was fit back then. The last hour no way. زي كده الهرم يعني that's the last hour. That's the Byzantine crest. That's the Byzantine crest. You have يعني in order to be on the safe side you have to start at midnight. In order to catch the sunrise. If you're fit, أنا بتكلم على موت سيناء. You need to probably rest. ما depends the sunrise الساعة كام.
Venus, but it might as well be. It's a remote peninsula in northern Greece that millions believe to be the most sacred spot on Earth. It's called Mount Athos, and prayers have been offered here every day with no interruption for more than 1,000 years. It was set aside by ancient emperors to be the spiritual capital of Orthodox Christianity, and has probably changed less over the centuries than any other inhabited place on the planet. The monks come here from all over and do everything they can to keep what they call the world far away. Not surprisingly, journalists are not exactly welcome. For more than 2 years now, we've been corresponding, negotiating, and frankly pleading for an invitation, but ran into one monastic wall after another. Then, much to our surprise and delight, a few months ago, the monks said, "Okay, come see who we are."
The story will continue in a moment.
This Byzantine cross marks the border between Mount Athos and the 21st century. The monks come here, as they always have, for the beauty, the tranquility, and the isolation. But most of all, for this. Father Yakovos is one of the few Americans on the mountain. He's been here more than half his life.
You have to understand the words that we're saying in today's liturgy are the same words that Christ was saying, the same words that saints from the 1st century, the 2nd century, the 3rd century, the 4th century.
And nothing has changed in Orthodoxy since then. It's the only branch of Christianity that can make that claim. Father Eliseos is the abbot, the top man, at Simonos Petras, one of the 20 monasteries. It was Abbot Eliseos who invited us here, and never let us forget what a rare privilege it was.
Έγινε μία φορά το 1981.
It happened once, in 1981.
The last time you invited a television crew here was 1981.
Correct. We weren't going to invite you, but your persistence convinced us to open the door.
The door he opened revealed the wonder that is Simonos Petras, which fits like a crown on top of a rock 800 feet above the Aegean. It was built in the 14th century, and the monks will tell you it must be considered a miracle that it hasn't fallen into the sea. There are 20 monasteries on Mount Athos. Some look like medieval fortresses. Others are so large they resemble small cities. They rise from virgin forests and line the coast, shrouded in mist. There's nothing on this 130 square mile peninsula other than monasteries and monks. Nothing. We expected Mount Athos to be a quiet place, but we couldn't have imagined how quiet until we were dropped off here. The silence is only broken by the occasional tapping on a chiseled piece of chestnut. It's a call to prayer, and it started being used here before there were bells.
Οι άνθρωποι που βρίσκονται εδώ έχουν ένα και μοναδικό σκοπό.
The monks here have one goal, and that is how to get closer to God.
Father Serapion wanted us to understand that there is no place on earth closer to heaven than Mount Athos.
Μόνο πάνω από 1000 εκκλησίες κάθε μέρα κάνουν θεία λειτουργία.
Every day, 1,000 divine liturgies are celebrated on the peninsula.
Είναι μοναδικό.
It's unique in the world and in the Orthodox Church.
Exactly what makes it unique.
Ο απόλυτος τρόπος της ζωής των μοναχών.
It's the absolute way of life of the monks.
It's a Spartan way of life, but all the monks we talked to said they never want to leave, not even for a day. So they try to be self-sufficient. They grow their own fruits and vegetables, do their own tailoring, and when they get sick, there's an in-monastery doctor, Father Emilios, who's not very busy because the monks are in excellent shape. There's remarkably little cancer, virtually no heart disease or Alzheimer's. They must be doing something right in addition to drinking wine at 9 in the morning. They eat 2 meals a day. There's what they call the first meal, which lasts 10 minutes, and the second meal, which lasts 10 minutes. There's no meat and no dinner table conversation. The only sound, a monk reading from sacred texts. We were surprised by how busy the monks are. When they're not praying, they're working. Father Theodosius, born a Lutheran in Germany, is a mechanical wizard who has given the monastery continuous electricity and occasional hot water.
Many Christians in the world, they are looking for the original church, for the ancient church.
You think this is the closest to the original church?
Yes. When you come to Orthodoxy, you will see it has everything you ever sought for.
Father Averkios takes care of the ancient footpaths here. He clears the trails. We went with him on what was for us an exhausting hike on the hills above the monastery. It wasn't tough for him, though. He says that after decades of roaming the world, this is his path.
I've been to many places.
Tell me where.
From Switzerland, of course, from Sweden, Finland, Spain, Portugal, Singapore, Australia, and Texas.
Texas? How did you like Texas?
I liked very much. I liked mostly the people.
Now, with all the traveling you've done, how did you end up here?
I was searching for a way of life. I can give all of myself to that. And I think the God of Jesus is above all the others, money, lifestyle, even family.
The family at Simonas Petrus consists of 54 monks from 8 countries. Father Yakovos came here 25 years ago from Winthrop, Massachusetts. It's about as beautiful as it gets.
I think so.
He took us on a tour of the monastery. It'd be tough enough to build a monastery on top of a rock today, but how did they do it in the 13th century?
You know, that's something which even modern-day architects are amazed at. When the workers came and saw the site where St. Simon, the founder of our monastery, wanted to build, they looked at him and they said,
"You're crazy."
"Are you crazy?" Of course.
So being crazy was not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Now, back then, how did you get stuff up here?
We have mules.
It takes 15 minutes to walk through the monastery into the sunlight. Enough time to find out that Father Yakovos' journey to Mount Athos started at the age of 6, when his father showed him a picture.
It was just so impressive. And I turned around and I said to him, "Dad, you know, I don't think that I'm going to be able to believe that somebody lives in that building until I step on those balconies myself."
Destiny.
It is a little bit too.
From the age of 6.
Yes.
Father Yakovos doesn't follow what's going on in Winthrop or anywhere else today. There are no newspapers, no radio, no television on Mount Athos. There are a few telephones, and Father Yakovos got a call last year. His father was dying.
Prior to his death, he was asking if I would go so I could see him one last time.
Reasonable request.
From a father, I think so. My response was negative, though.
You didn't go?
I didn't go. I didn't go because of the fact that monastics do not go to funerals of their relatives or their friends. They remain here at the monastery.
When your father asked you to come see him one last time, and you said no, was there any feeling of, I'm letting my father down?
Not at all. I know that we're going to see each other in paradise one day.
The whole idea at Mount Athos is not only to isolate oneself from the outside world, but to let go of all memories of one's past life. The purpose of your being here, as I understand it, is prayer without distraction.
I'm not being distracted now.
Why are you laughing? First tell me why you're laughing.
Why am I laughing? Because St. Paul says we're to pray unceasingly.
What's funny about that?
That's not what's funny about it. What's funny is how you think I can stop praying.
You're praying every minute of the day.
Even right now when we're talking.
Really?
Of course.
You don't see Father Yakovos praying while he's talking. But look at these other monks. Their lips never stop moving, not for a second. They just keep reciting the Jesus prayer day and night. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. It becomes like breathing. Some monks say they can pray when they sleep, and they get no more than 3 hours sleep a night. But Mount Athos gets more applicants than it can handle. It's harder to get into than Harvard. A man comes as a novice, he's free to leave if he doesn't like it, and the monks can tell him to leave if they don't like him.
When a novice arrives here, can you tell whether he's going to make it or not? Can you tell whether he's going to qualify to be a monk?
Όχι παραπάνω από ελάχιστο χρόνο το καταλαβαίνουμε.
After a while, it becomes pretty obvious whether or not someone is cut out for it, which is why we have a trial period, which can last up to 3 years.
I bet you know a lot sooner than 3 years. Vivers.
Certainly.
Once he's accepted into the community, it's a lifetime commitment, and life never changes here. Never. Every day at 3 in the morning, a single bell rings, informing the brothers that it's time to stop praying on their own and start praying in church. On a typical day, and every day is a typical day, the services last 8 hours. The monks say it's an 8-hour conversation with God, a dress rehearsal for eternity. And remember, this doesn't only happen on Sundays, it happens every day, 365 days a year. A monk never gets a day off. This is the Divine Liturgy, the life of Christ celebrated by men whose only passion is to move closer to Christ every day. The depth of their devotion defies description. They didn't look like the same monks we had met in the gardens and the workshops. They were utterly transformed, with a concentration so profound they were immune from distraction. There were occasional flashes of ecstasy. This old monk could have risen out of a Rembrandt.
Βούλων μεουν προσεύχεστε τους άνδρας εν παντή τόπο.
There are no musical instruments in the church, just chanting, chanting without end. Many of the voices, the basses in particular, could have made it at the Met. We didn't understand the words. We didn't really have to. This phrase we knew. Lord, have mercy. The most miraculous thing about Mount Athos, when we return. The most miraculous thing about Mount Athos may simply be the fact that it's still there. Over the centuries, it's been invaded by crusaders, Ottomans, mercenaries, pirates, and Franks. The Nazis had their eyes on it too. The 2,000 monks attribute their survival, not surprisingly, to divine intervention. But they've also been pretty crafty. Some of the measures they've taken will surprise you. If you'd like to come for a visit, though, it can be arranged, but it's not easy. First, you'll need a visa issued by the monks. And unless you're an Orthodox pilgrim, it can take a while. Next, you'll fly to Athens and Make your way to a scruffy little town in northern Greece where there's no airport and where the roads are dicey. Then you'll hop on a ferry, unless the trip has been canceled because of rough seas. That happens all the time. But on a calm day, it can be a very pleasant ride.
The story will continue in a moment.
The monks will tell you it takes years of prayer and soul searching before they're ready to leave the world for Mount Athos. For the likes of us, though, it takes little more than an hour. It was the beginning of Lent when we took these pictures, and the ferry was packed with pilgrims from all over the Orthodox Christian world. Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, Romanians, Russians. It wasn't long before the first monasteries came into view, and we thought we were sailing to Byzantium, to a fantasy land of castles and palaces. We were headed for Vatopedi, one of the oldest and largest monasteries on Mount Athos. It had the feel of a medieval city. Holiness seemed to seep from the very stones, from the frescoes on the 10th century church, from the marble font for holy water. But then there was the monastery's secular-looking centerpiece. There's nothing remarkable about the clock tower at the Vatopedi Monastery, except for one thing. Check out the time. It's just about 8:30. Now, my watch reads 2:30. That's a 6-hour difference. And there's nothing wrong with their clock or with my watch. It's because the monks on Mount Athos keep Byzantine time. The day starts at sunset, not at midnight. The monks measured time this way during the days of the Byzantine Empire. That's the Christian empire that followed the fall of Rome. And that's the flag they still fly here. How long ago did the Byzantine Empire fall?
1453. 1453. That's a well-known fact.
Well, it wasn't to us, but to Father Serapion, 1453 is the day before yesterday. This peninsula is the only place in the world that still keeps Byzantine time.
It has maintained this time for some 550 years.
It was harvest time when we arrived, and dozens of monks were hard at work in the olive groves on the hills overlooking the monastery. That's where we ran into Father Nicandros from Melbourne, Australia.
This place looks like a summer resort, like a holiday resort, like a retreat, but it's not. It's an arena.
It's an arena?
Yes.
What do you mean?
The unseen warfare.
Unseen warfare?
That's right.
What does that mean?
We fight against the angels of the dark side, you see? Of the devil, Satan.
The battle against Satan and the dark side is waged here every day. The spiritual leader at Vatopedi is Abbot Ephraim.
Here, the life of Christ is experienced in a genuine way. And this doesn't happen in many other places in the world. What I'm talking about is the art of salvation.
It just so happened that while we were there, the monks celebrated an elaborate 7-hour vigil, and the church was packed with pilgrims. It's held once a year to honor the archangels Gabriel and Michael. According to the Bible, Gabriel and Michael led the army of angels that expelled Satan from heaven. The church's relics are brought out every day, and pilgrims ask for the blessing of the saints. The most sacred relic on the entire peninsula is in this case, fabric said to be part of a garment worn by the Virgin Mary. The irony is that while the Mother of God is revered here, no other woman is permitted to even set foot on Mount Athos. It's been like that for 1,000 years. The reason, according to Orthodox doctrine, is that Christ gave the peninsula to his mother,
and all other women have been excluded so as to fully honor the Virgin Mary. It's also been said that in the days before the ban, when women did come here, the monks became distracted and couldn't devote themselves entirely to prayer. They say it's been a lot easier since the last lady left. Keeping women out certainly wasn't much of a problem 300-400 years ago. Do you feel that's becoming problematic today?
Όχι, δεν γίνεται πιο
I don't think so, because the monastery itself and all the land around it is our property. And if we don't want women coming onto our property, we have every right to do that.
Mount Athos may be the last all-male bastion in the world, and Father Arsenio says it has to stay that way.
Στον χώρο αυτό,
Here, we are concerned solely with purity and our elevation to eternity.
αναβάθμιση
If women are permitted, they bring their families and their children. This place would become a tourist attraction and no longer a place of silence.
If we wanted to experience profound silence, we're advised to go to Stavronikita. It's the smallest monastery on the Holy Mountain, but it has some of the most remarkable treasures. You stay in the silence just by walking in. There's no electricity here, so the icons and mosaics are illuminated only by shafts of sunlight and a few candles. St. Nicholas, the patron saint, John the Baptist, and the Virgin Mary. We were stunned by the magnificence of the art here, but then we ran into Father Maximus, a former professor at the Harvard Divinity School. He told us what we were seeing cannot be described as art.
They're devotional objects, and they're part of the living liturgical life of the church. So we don't have any art, and we're not a museum. I mean, to put it starkly.
Whatever you call it, it's priceless. That's why the monasteries have been invaded and plundered so many times over the centuries. The monks' most recent brush with history happened only 70 years ago. The Nazis were coming their way.
In the spring of 1941, the Germans invaded and occupied Greece.
They marched up the Acropolis, raised the swastika beside the Parthenon, and were about to invade. The monks asked for a meeting with Nazi officers who advised them to appeal to Hitler himself. And the monks wrote a letter to Hitler.
A letter was written, and in the letter the monks identified themselves. They said, this is who we are. And they asked Hitler to place the Holy Mountain under his personal protection.
What kind of response did you get?
Well, it seems that Hitler liked the idea and accepted the invitation to become the personal protector of the Holy Mountain.
Well, let me just get that straight. Hitler, the personal protector of the Holy Mountain.
That's right. That's right.
Hitler did send a team of German academics to Mount Athos. They took 1,800 pictures of the mountain's treasures, and it wasn't because they enjoyed photography. Hitler wanted the monastery's riches in Berlin.
The professors were sent as an advance team to catalog the treasures of the Holy Mountain so that a selection of things could be made to be removed.
Didn't happen, did it?
No, it didn't. Not a single thing was taken.
Father Maximus believes they have the Russians to thank for that by the time the Nazi scholars completed their work, Hitler was bogged down in Russia and wasn't thinking about icons. That Nazi period has been largely forgotten here. To the monks, it was just one more blip on the road, and a small one at that. Today, Vatopedi is the most popular destination on the mountain. It hosts 35,000 pilgrims a year and offers more than spiritual sustenance. The monks have their own fishing boats, and the catch is pretty good. The fish are served fresher than in any Greek restaurant. The refectory dates from the 12th century, and since the 12th century, the food here has been free. Vatopedi has been supported by rich benefactors, emperors, princes, kings, and today, partially by pilgrims with deep pockets who commission icons in the making. But the ancient treasures? Not a chance. They can't even see them. They're under lock and key. It's not a new security system, but it works. Normally, it takes more than one monk to unlock the door, because no one monk is allowed to have all 4 keys at the same time. It's sort of a medieval version of the nuclear launch control.
Do you keep those keys in your pocket, Father?
Try not to.
Father Matthew from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, was given the abbot's blessing to let us into the inner sanctum. Once inside, there was still another hidden door.
Behind the curtain?
We walked into the world of Byzantium. It was hard to imagine that everything here was at least 600 years old, because the brilliance had not faded. There are almost 4,000 icons stored in this monastery alone.
Oh, wow.
The highlight, a 14th century icon of Christ. Every monk will tell you the sole purpose of life on Mount Athos is to get closer to Christ every day. And they say total union with Christ is only possible when they leave this world.
Πρώτο πράγμα που κάνει ένας μοναχός είναι να αγαπήσει το θάνατο.
The first thing a monk does is embrace and love death.
Embrace and love death. Γιατί ο θάνατος...
Because death is the ticket to the other life. Without a ticket, you can't travel.
Where do you get the ticket? Εδώ, στη ζωή αυτή.
In this life, that's what we do each day. We prepare for death.
Για το ταξίδι μας προς τον ουρανό.
And we are joyful about our journey to heaven.
Right. Father Matthew offered to take us to the transit point between this world and heaven. When a monk dies, he's buried until there's nothing left but bones. Then he is brought to where every monk who's ever lived here ends up, the ossuary.
Any idea how many skulls there are here?
Thousands. I'm not sure how many thousands.
Any idea how far they go back?
The ones here would be to the 16th century.
When you look at the ossuary, what comes to mind?
Mostly I see that this is where I'm going to be. I always like to say these are my future roommates.
There was nowhere for us to go from there. So we headed back to the mainland. The monks invited us to come back any time. And if we do, or if our grandsons or great-grandsons do, after 10 days here, this much we believe. Mount Athos will not have changed at all.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to see the challenges of scaling and shooting a story on Mount Athos.
We talk about people, monks quarreling here. I see monks smiling all the time.
Well, a lot of people get the idea that this is it is a serious life, but it's not a somber life. You know, we take things seriously here, but there's a joy that happens because of the person's relationship with God. As that relationship grows, the joy that the Holy Spirit can bring to a person, which is one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, is joy. It's obvious that that's going to happen to a monk. And so it's no surprise that a monk will have joy, and that will be expressed outwardly.
Do you think monks here are happier than people in the outside world?
Yeah, without question. Without question.
Do you sort of, I don't know what the word would be, pity people who are still living in the outside world with all the encumbrance?
I wouldn't use the word pity.
What word would you use?
We feel sorry that people can't understand or don't understand some of the things that we've been given to understand. You know, how God does that and what his economy is for people in the world. God gives everybody the opportunity. But we always feel sorry that there are so many people that don't respond to the love of God the way that they ought to.
What is the relationship between Mount Athos and Greece?
Yeah, Mount Athos is an autonomous, self-administered region within the territory of Greece. In the early part of the 20th century, after Mount Athos was liberated from the Ottoman Empire, its charter was included within the Greek constitution, which recognizes its special sort of privileged status as a kind of autonomous region, as I've said.
You don't vote in Greek elections?
No, no.
Can you hold office in Greek government?
No, no.
Does any monk from Mount Athos hold office in the Greek government?
Certainly not.
You're sort of an independent republic.
Well, we're not a sovereign state. We're not it would be mistaken to say that we're a state within a state. I mean, from its very origins, Mount Athos has always been a territory within a state. So it was initially a territory within the Byzantine Empire. Later it was territory within the Ottoman Empire, and now it's territory within modern Greece. But it's a self-administered, autonomous territory.
Self-administered, self-governing?
Right.
In what respect is it not a republic?
Well, we don't have our own banking system. We don't have an ambassadorial sort of system. We don't issue our own currencies and all of the things that people think of when they think of a sovereign state.
You issue your own visas. We needed a visa before we could come visit you.
You're referring to the sort of the piece of paper with a colorful stamp on it. That's yeah.
What it took for us to get on the boat.
Right. This is the Holy Mountains permission that's given to visitors and pilgrims, but it's not. It doesn't have the kind of status that it's not. We don't stamp your passport. In other words.
Right. In that respect, you are, or in several respects, you're different from the Vatican.
In several and many, and some would say in all.
Okay. Back to what we won't call art. If you added it up, how significant would it be, both in cultural and, forgive me, Father, in monetary terms?
It would be impossible, absolutely impossible to calculate. You're talking about, first of all, you're talking about architectural monuments of the highest caliber that are more than 1,000 years old. Churches and other kinds of buildings that have been functioning since the 10th century. And then many of these buildings are frescoed, and some of them have frescoes as old as the 13th century and older. There are thousands of icons. Mount Athos has a quarter of the world's Greek manuscripts. It has about 8,000 manuscripts from the Byzantine period alone, and there are all kinds of other, I mean, people call them treasures. Again, it's a term of convenience. There are all kinds of other objects, wood carvings, metalwork, textiles. It would be impossible to try to set any kind of a price on it.
How?
And why would one want to? I mean,
this place is built like a fortress.
Yes, it really is. Yeah.
Why?
Well, there are two basic reasons. One's symbolic, of course, and one is practical. I suppose we should begin with a symbolic reason. It's because of the fact that monasteries are fortresses. They're bastions of the Orthodox faith.
Does everyone on the other side of these waters live in sin?
Of course not. That's why, because we also still remain in the world. We're apostles of Christ.
Yeah.
He sent his apostles.
Let's not be biblical. Let's be practical about this. You don't have television.
No.
You don't have radio.
No.
You don't have newspapers.
No.
You're trying to keep the world out.
We're trying to keep sin out. Evil.
You know, Maya Angelou has been my most steadfast counselor for my entire life. I discovered her probably 30 years ago when